Imagine you are giving directions to a stranger on the street. Suddenly, two workers walk between you, carrying a large door. In the 2 seconds your view is blocked, the stranger is swapped out for a completely different person. Half of all people subjected to this real Harvard psychology experiment never notice the switch. This happens because your brain operates like a predictive text engine. It takes in a few visual cues, assumes the rest of the scene based on memory, and fills in the blanks to save energy. As we grow up, we stop observing the physical details of our environment. We don't trace the specific grain of the wood on a chair. We just apply the verbal label chair and move on. Our internal narrator runs so efficiently that it overrides our raw sensory inputs. We spend most of our waking hours effectively blind to our actual physical surroundings. But before the age of 4, humans experience a very different reality. Infants live in a high-definition, wordless flood of raw spatial and sensory data. We can see glimpses of this uncategorized world in a young autistic girl named Nadia. Before she could speak, she possessed a savant ability to draw complex subjects, like horses, with the astonishing precision of a Renaissance master. Look at this technical image. This is a Paleolithic cave painting of a horse, drawn by early human ancestors who relied entirely on pure, uncategorized visual observation for survival. When Nadia went to school and learned to form basic sentences, her genius-level drawing abilities vanished. As children learn to speak, the brain physically prunes its imagery capabilities to prioritize verbal systems. Robert Graves called language a cool web. It works like a compression algorithm, translating high-definition sensory experiences into a low-resolution verbal code. Because our adult brains search for memories using this linguistic codebook, they cannot access the image-encrypted data stored during our infancy. Look at this sweeping photograph of the Piazza del Duomo in Milan. Now look at this architectural layout of the same square. A local lawyer was asked to imagine standing in the piazza. He could easily name the buildings on the right side, but not a single building on the left. A stroke had physically deleted the left half of his mental map. The fact that a stroke can physically delete half of a person's imagination identifies the mind's eye as a tangible biological hardware system. Visual thought splits from the visual cortex into 2 roads. The lower ventral pathway is the what system, conjuring specific details of a face. The upper dorsal pathway is the where system, a spatial map allowing you to mentally rotate 3D objects. Neuroscientists at Harvard found that creating a picture in your mind requires wiring the exact same visual cortex hardware as looking at a real object right in front of you. Italian researchers tested this by having subjects look at ambiguous optical illusions while repeating nonsense syllables like la la la. By forcing the language centers to focus on babble, the subjects' visual brains suddenly became much better at seeing the illusions flip back and forth. Your internal verbal monologue is in a constant physical tug-of-war for processing power with your visual hardware, and most of the time, the words win. Because the mind's eye runs on physical neural networks, it acts exactly like a muscle. It grows through use. Consider this photograph of a black taxicab navigating the complex streets of London. Drivers spend years memorizing thousands of intertwining routes. Brain scans show that this intense spatial exercise physically enlarges the hippocampus in experienced cabbies. We see a similar effect in people who are born deaf and use American Sign Language. Their daily communication requires them to constantly construct and rotate 3-dimensional mental architecture, resulting in extraordinary spatial visualization skills. This constant demand for spatial processing forces the adult brain to physically reshape its own structure. You can trigger this exact same neuroplasticity. You do it by deliberately practicing raw, multisensory imagery. Close your eyes and focus entirely on the physical texture of a cold apple, or the exact sound of wind rustling through pine needles. Forcing your brain to hold on to these high-definition sensory details temporarily starves the dominant language centers of processing power. It breaks the automatic cycle of predictive viewing. When we consciously put down our verbal filters, we stop scanning the world for easy labels. We exercise the physical muscle of the mind's eye, slow down the blur of passing time, and finally see the world as it actually is.